Good morning and welcome to this morning's episode of the Amateur in the Morning. I am your host, the Forex Amateur. Today is Monday morning and I believe it's the 6th of December, 7th of December. Oh, wow. The days are just flying by, But anyway, as you know, I like to break down my view of the synthetic indices market on this session, as well as the dollar index futures in the NASDAQ equity market. So that is basically what I am going to be focused on for today. So let's talk a little bit about volatility 50 since I am on the chart currently, right? So volatility 50, I've been looking at the probability that it could most likely trade to the upside, right? Because it is showing a lot of rejections off the bottom and a high likelihood that it will most likely go back to the upside. Just give me a second. Right. So let's look at that. So looking at the daily chart, you can see here, let me just get my annotator out here. So looking at the daily chart down in here, you can see that we formed a low, pushed up, formed a lower high, and formed basically a lower low, but I wouldn't really consider this a lower low because price then came back up immediately directly after that. And now it's in sort of a consolidation at the moment. Looking at this, there's a very high likelihood that we'll see price trade back to the upside, say to around this blue zone that I've got marked in here, before we see price continue either all the way back to the upside or back to the downside from that point. Let me just drop down to the H4 chart and let's have a more detailed look at that. So if you look at the H4 chart, we can see there's that low that was created on the daily, lower high, so-called lower low, but we can see price has now come all the way back into the range of that previous low, and it's now basically consolidating in that area. So if you look here, right here, you can see that that is the range that price is currently consolidating in at the moment. So looking at this, I'm actually more keen on looking for buys, right? Because if you can see in here, we basically formed this pattern in here, and then price pulled up, and now it's basically broken above previous highs, and it's pushed back to the downside. That is showing me a willingness that price wants to go higher, right? So I'll be looking at perhaps maybe taking buys up into this area here as a first target, secondary target at around this area, and obviously final target at around this area in here for any buying opportunities that we do get. If you drop down to like the H1 time frame, we most likely see like a counter trend with a breakout of the trend line, which you can basically see right here at this point in here. You can see a counter trend right here, breakout, pull back in, and price has formed a higher high, currently sitting in a higher high, higher low formation at the moment. So we'll most likely look to see price continue back to the upside from this point in here, right? So looking at this for today, I would be looking to see perhaps price might want to pull back and give us a retest at around the structure in here, right? Something to that effect. And then I'll be looking to take buys back to the upside. Let's move on from volatility 50. As you know, I've only got two synthetic indices charts currently that I'm currently sharing on these episodes. And the reason for that is because all of the other charts that I was watching, that I was sharing on these episodes, just got really boring. And I found myself forcing myself to look at those charts and trying to find setups and stuff like that. So that's not really the way that I like to trade. So since I found myself, not really looking at those charts with the same eye anymore, I decided to basically drop them off from that. Now, looking at volatility 75, I have been speaking about volatility 75 getting back into this area that it's currently sitting at the moment, ever since it left this area here, right? So we have been talking about that. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I did highlight a weekly setup as well from this area right here, stop loss below this area, with the target at this area right in here, right? So if you were able to take advantage of that, very well done on that note. Looking at it going forward right now, I would actually look for this market to come back to the downside, to be honest, right? So what I'm most likely seeing at the moment, which is what I highlighted a couple of weeks back as well, is a possible head and shoulders formation forming right here, right? So we could see price coming back into around this area in here, give us a last push to the upside, break above the high, maybe retest the high. Anything can happen before we see it pushing back to the downside. Overall, looking at this market, this is the weekly time frame, right? So looking at the monthly time frame, we can see we're still extremely bullish on there. But if we drop down to the daily time frame, we can see a lot of rejection coming off the upside, right? Looking at it for today, I would actually be more keen to look for sells right now, to look for sells back to the downside. Just looking at the daily time frame, so I am expecting price to most likely come back to around this area today, bounce up and maybe come back into this line that I've basically highlighted here to retest broken structure. So from this point, we could get maybe another bounce in there, and then get it to push down again from that point. Let's just drop down to the H4 time frame so we can have a clearer look at this. Looking at H4, you can see that we've got price rejecting off the upside multiple times at the moment. So I just want to drop down to H1 because I see some sort of a pattern forming there, right? So we can see here we've got price coming back to this previous broken structure right here and retesting it. We've got a candle through that area and a candle back up into that area. So looking at that for right now, I would actually be keen on looking at buying this back up into around this area here for retest, right? Back into this zone in here for retest before we look for other possible short opportunities right now. Because if you look at this area right here, we've got this downward channel that's currently forming in here, right? Which means the price will most likely break to the upside based on retail techniques before continuing back to the downside from that point in there, right? So that is currently a probability at the moment. When I look at this market, I'm still very keen on the daily time frame to look for sells. I did highlight a couple sells in here as well, which actually didn't play out because we can see price actually pushed further up than I was expecting it to. But that's fine because when you look at it from a weekly perspective, you can see that we've had this trend line over here as well, which price has basically touched for the third time in there, broken above and broken back below. In these instances here, you could even take a sell and put a stop loss somewhere above this wick in here, and you'd still be looking at a very good trade for price to come back to the downside. Cool. Let's just move on to the dollar index future. Okay, looking at the dollar index on the daily time frame. Let's just have a look at that real quick. Like last week, actually on Friday's episode, I don't believe I uploaded Friday's episode, but on Friday's episode, I might upload it today. We'll see what happens. I did speak about the dollar becoming bullish around early this week, right? Monday, Tuesday this week. So as you can see in here, we've got a nice strong rejection of Friday's candle in there. And today's candle is basically retested and pushed to the upside. Now, this pink line is something that I've been speaking about for a while as well, because I've been looking at this area in here as a possible rejection. Now, don't get fooled by that because overall, I am still expecting this market to get down to this yellow block that I've got over there. So we'll be looking at how that reacts, right? So if you look at it on the monthly time frame as well, I'm still expecting it to sort of trade down into here. So what we could see happening today is we could see a rejection coming off this area, right? So let's just drop down to the H4 and let's talk about it a bit more. So we could see a rejection coming off that area on the daily and weekly, right? You can see here on the H4 as well, we've got this low that was created. We've got price breaking above this low right now. And creating a higher high, right? So it'll most likely perhaps come back and create a higher low again, right? Let me just get my annotator. Actually, let me get this. Right, so we can see this structure in here has been broken basically, right? Price currently trading above this area. So right now, if we do get continued bullish momentum, then we would look at perhaps a rejection from this area, but price perhaps reaching back into this area in here before it most likely pulls back again, right? So overall, currently, as long as the market remains bullish, then we will see this area being tested. And shortly after that, we will see this area right here being tested again, right? So just looking at today, I won't make any sort of predictions or projections on the market for today. Reason for that is because it's a Monday, right? Anything can happen on a Monday. Looking at the technicals, however, we can see a reason for the market pulling back a bit today, right, to come and retest even this supply zone that we've got in here, right, to even come and retest that supply zone before we continue back to the downside. So there is a reason for the market to pull back today before it continues bearish maybe later on in the week. Right, cool. So let's move on to the NASDAQ equity. All right, NASDAQ. So I did speak about, I think I actually cleared this chart, so my analysis is gone, right? So we've been speaking about this area here, and I keep saying it, right? So we've been speaking about NASDAQ getting back up into this high ever since it was down here around the 16th, right, of November. So we can see that it has actually moved up very, very strongly. Looking at what's happening currently at the moment, we can see that we've got a very high depletion in momentum to the upside. That's showing us that there's a likelihood that we'll most likely be pushing back to the downside. Looking at the weekly time frame, however, I cannot see any clear structure at the moment to see this market most likely pushing back down, right? So at the moment, I'm currently in a wait and see sort of process at the moment, right? So because there's not really much information on this chart currently. Looking at the monthly, however, I've been speaking about NASDAQ getting back up into this yellow block right up here, which I also posted on social media back when we were here, back in September. I posted NASDAQ getting back into this. So you can go and check it out on my IG as well, where I spoke about it. And we can see that it is currently drawing towards that area in there. Now, as I've been speaking, as long as we see the dollar index remaining bearish, there's a very high likelihood we'll see the equities market being bullish, right? Because there is a slight correlation between those two markets. When you look at it from an investment perspective, if people are, if the dollar is losing value, then people will be looking for places to invest that dollar, right? In order to ensure that the yield from that depleting value in the dollar actually increases. So if you invest, for instance, like if your buying power of your dollar currently is like, say you get $10 worth of goods for $1, right? And your dollar is losing value in that it's depleting its value, right? So what's actually happening is instead of you in the next couple of days being able to buy $10 worth of products with $1, you'll now be able to buy $2 worth of products with $1, right? So what people do in essence is they essentially take the cash and they move it into other assets, asset groups to be able to increase the yield, right? Because if the dollar is losing value, then equities are most likely gaining value. Commodities are most likely gaining value since the universal measurement is based on the dollar itself, right? So that's why you'll notice in most cases, if the dollar is losing value, people are pumping more money into the equities market because the yield will sort of increase based on that, as well as the value at which you purchase at that point will also be decreased, right? So it's a very technical way of looking at it. But that's generally how I see it working out, is when the NASDAQ is bearish, you'll generally notice the dollar being bullish at that point, right? So that's a very cool way of looking at it as well, just to sort of make sense of it. And in the instances where the correlation doesn't really work, like I said, it's not really something that I've back tested to see its effectiveness, but it is something that I have noticed. So if I get more into trading these instruments, then perhaps I'll do more work in them. But right now, or should I say for the unforeseeable future, my focus is synthetic indices because it's not impacted by any events. It's not impacted by any sort of news. It's not impacted by the world economy type of shit. It's just a fluid market, high volume, and it's perfect for me because it's what I've been trying to basically get used to for the longest period of time, right? So let's look at the 4-hour chart on the NASDAQ, and let's have a look if we can see any sort of clear structure on here. Now, last week I did speak about this area right in here. So I did speak about this area right in here, which we had recently broken, right? So right here, which we had recently broken, and I said price would most likely come back to it and retest it. As you can see, we got a nice retest there, we got a nice retest there, and price has gone bullish from that point onwards. Now, looking at this market for today, We can see a bit of a channel breaking down in here, but as I said, I really don't trade channels. We can see a bit of a channel breaking down in there. Perhaps if you're forcing it, you could take one from here up into there, which really doesn't make any sense to me why people do that. But yeah, looking at this right now, we can see that price is basically just cruising back up to the upside. There is no sort of volume in any of these movements. A lot of it is just very corrective in its nature, right? So perhaps the best thing to do right now, look at it. Even if you look at the 1 hour chart, you can see that it's just consolidation for most of the way, right? So you can see we get strong consolidations, one big candle to the upside, strong consolidation, one big candle to the upside. So there isn't really any tradable opportunities right now, unless you're most likely going to drop down to like the 15-minute chart or the 5-minute chart and scalp, which doesn't really work for me at this point, right? Because I don't spend that much time on the charts anymore. Anyway, looking at that, like I said, the dollar index is showing a lot of bullish signs right now for a possible pullback throughout today. So it might be a good idea to look for selling opportunities on NASDAQ just until there's a transition, because if you look at the structure on the dollar index, it's much clearer than what you're seeing currently on the equities market. So it might be better to make decisions based on what we're looking at on there. So that's it from my side. Not really much more that I do need to cover. I've basically spoken about all of my thoughts on these markets. So until next time, it has been a pleasure as always to share with you guys, and I am wishing you a blessed and a profitable trading journey. I was actually going to say trading day, but trading journey works just as well. Catch up with you guys same time tomorrow.